Okay, we're doing this again. I'm having a really hard time coming to terms with how I felt about Interstellar. On the surface, it's really good. There's plenty of gravitas to be found in the cast, it's got great cinematography, it's emotionally moving at moments, it's one of those special flicks that should only be experienced in cinemas down to the very size and scope of the whole thing, and it's also kinda really annoyingly, frustratingly disappointing. To me anyway, because it's another one of those highly ambitious sci-fi flicks where it feels like there's been just a little too much focus on its visuals than its screenplay, join the club why don't you, which plays out more like a first draft than anything else. Don't get me wrong, a lot of it still works regardless, but there's just the odd nonsensical story element, convenience in the narrative, or confusing character action, which decides to spread itself all over the flick, causing the whole thing to get progressively worse the more you go on, and man, that ending is f***ing stupid. But if we're judging it purely on a spectacle level, congratulations, you've made one of the best films of the year. Why yes, as a matter of fact, I am getting tired of providing the same damn good visuals but poor screenplay criticism over and over again. Hey, I'll stop saying it when they stop doing it. Our story, it's the undisclosed future and Earth can no longer sustain life. It's been devastated by drought and famine, causing a scarcity in food and extreme changes in climate. When former NASA pilot turned local farmer Coop and his daughter Murphy discover coded messages sent to them by an unknown source by means of gravitational waves, they discover the coordinates to a secret NASA installation led by Michael Caine's Professor Brand. There it's revealed that they found a miraculously formed wormhole that can send them to a distant galaxy which may contain planets suitable for sustaining human life and allowing the race to live on. Coop takes command of the flight and decides to leave his children with the promise of returning one day, and any more than that would start to spoil the movie. As a whole, it sets its goals in the right direction for the most part. The flick is filled with the exploration of all these huge ideas of godlike proportions, extraterrestrial intelligence, evolution, human survival, home, family, the list goes on, which then attempts to humanize it all by having the story, at its core, be about a father and his daughter. This, in conceptual terms, is the right way to go, with all this needlessly complicated plotting in an almost 3-hour-long runtime, one of which is never really justified. You need something a little more emotionally tangible to hold it all together. The premise alone winds us up with the first act that delivers leaps and bounds and was arguably my favourite part of the film. McConaughey pulls in a great performance, even the child actors are good. Seriously, bravo, those are hard to come by. This chapter of the story is completely engrossing, it manages to hit the heartstrings within the first hour, and this depiction of a future Earth where dust gets everywhere gives Nolan a nice excuse to make everything look wonderfully weird, and the actual concept behind it is one that I dig quite a bit. Of all the dystopian futures we've had this year, I found this one to be arguably the more original of the bunch. The second act seems to suitably sit comfortably between 1 and 3 as a mixed bag. It all mostly contains planet exploration, cool, tense spaceship action, and perhaps one too many scenes of characters crying, but there's always something going on and it's entertaining all the way through. The movie will most likely gain credibility for scenes like the one in which Coop has to say goodbye to Murph, and deservedly so. It's very well done because the stakes are high enough that you understand both viewpoints on his leaving, it relies on good actors doing good performances, and while it's very sad, it still manages to get you excited for the adventure that lies ahead. It really hits its emotional peak far too early. As I said earlier, one of the problems is the script, one which comes off as a sincere attempt at telling a captivating story but seems to fall apart at the seams the second you stop and revisit it, but what I hate to say is that the biggest flaw here is actually ambition. Interstellar shoots for far too much and ultimately suffers beneath its own weight. It can't figure out if it wants to be a realistic sci-fi exploration flick or a sci-fi fantasy, which means when all of these completely out there unrealistic plot elements and concepts come into play, all that technobabble and space jargon the characters spent so much time desperately trying to shoehorn into Act 2 earlier, which just comes off as the filmmakers going, "No, look, we really did do our homework," instead of providing the audience with actual important information, then becomes time which could have been spent better explaining what the hell was going on in that third act. A huge part of why the whole theme of love transcending time and space and the story get lost in the convoluted shuffle is because Nolan seems far more interested in paying off all that juicy ambiguity he spreads throughout Act 1 just for the sake of getting the audience to go, "Oh, that thing was this thing the whole time," instead of actually focusing on wrapping up the narrative in a way that makes sense. Not only is it kind of obvious that the finale will contain some type of snarky gotcha, but when we finally get there it blatantly forgets that we care more about what's going on here and finding a way to save Earth than plot points and spending 10 minutes gawking over the film's intelligence. Yes, well done, you did a mildly clever thing that ties into things we saw earlier. Can we get back to the story of the film now, please? This is where the difference between realistic sci-fi and sci-fi fantasy becomes really important. It almost feels as if last year's Gravity suddenly ended like this year's Lucy, and that really left me feeling disappointed. In a movie with a runtime that rivals The Godfather, for crying out loud, are you seriously telling me that you couldn't have made just a little more use of that room to explain the ending in a way that made sense? In a way that didn't leave vital, important information out? In a way that didn't contrive characters to just jump to impossible to guess conclusions so that the film could actually end? Ugh. But I digress. When all is said and done, Interstellar is still the most ambitious, original, brave, and, despite its script flaws, resonant film you'll find yourself seeing this week. And if anything, that means it will make for one of the more interesting films of the year. Some people will love it, some people will hate it, but everyone will be discussing it. And that's a good thing. Cheers for watching, guys, and as always, if you like this video, you can subscribe to my channel.